Everybody. This is Erik Bohlin, and I'm here to talk with you this evening. We have, I have more topics to talk about than I have time, and some of you might laugh out there because I can certainly talk. And that was not always the case um, with things. Um, I've during some of the midst of the coronavirus, all that, I didn't know what to say. Like, I really just don't know what to say. But now I feel like there's a number of things we can talk about. Um, Tonight, the topic was going to be how not to be a victim. And I really wanted to develop this topic um, of what does it mean to be a victim. And a victim is kind of like I wear certain glasses. I see the world through the eyes of how something's happening to me. And how I respond to that puts me in a place of powerlessness, feeling vulnerable, hopeless, helpless. And I think it's really important to know that maybe there is a use for that at times, but in the world I work with, that doesn't really serve a person. Like, even when I would type up notes, a victim of childhood abuse or childhood sexual abuse, it's kind of like, does the word victim actually help them? Could I write um, experience sexual abuse? Would that be more useful of a term? A few live streams ago, I got a training, and one of the experts in post-traumatic stress disorder, and he said a bold statement. He said, there are no victims except a dead body and a child. And I thought, yeah, a victim might be a body. And even depending on your belief system there, you might go, well, just because I'm dead. The victim mentality often can cause us to be further victimized because we see the world as how bad people do things to me. And so maybe there's a social victim aspect where it's a repeating pattern with people. Okay, I'm getting a message that audio and video are good. But I'm getting also a message that says there's not enough bandwidth here. I want to fix that. Not. Hmm. Boy. Can I live with the stream status is poor? It said it was healthy. Okay, I'm going to live with this. If any of you are watching and having trouble seeing me, go ahead and tell me, and I will change it. So, okay, great. Thanks. The victim mentality, no doubt, started with the fall. And it's kind of like the opposite of victim mentality is that I have choices. I can I can have a choice here how I respond. I don't have to be at the mercy of of what happens to me. And I see this all the time. There are people that have suffered horrible situations and they still seem to maintain some positive um, disposition. I think, and you're coming to me for counseling. I help them by God's grace, or a few people it's not meant to be, but um, yeah, I take my hat off to them. They're such strong people. And those people, I would think of victim mentality at all. It's kind of like they see that life is hard anyway. Life is difficult anyway. And once you accept that, actually life gets easier. If you expect life to be easy, then it gets more difficult. And I first heard about this, and I look at my bookshelf, from M. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled. And his very first line is, "Life is difficult." And he says that if we accept this fact, then we get better. But if I'm going at this world with life's supposed to be good all the time, everybody is supposed to love me, my day is supposed to go through smoothly, um, what else can happen? I should have plenty of money. Um, the spiritual life should be easy. I'm going to have some rude awakening, and I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be wondering, why are things not going the way I want? Yeah, it's that's going to cause me issues. Um, we see in our world, like, I would invite you this week to not judge, but to scan and notice who's more likely to be in a victim mode and who's likely to not think that way. They just don't. And it comes out in subtle speech. Like, you can hear someone complain about the traffic, or the traffic is so bad, or this bus is taking so long. And it's kind of like there's a personal aspect to this. Like, it's happening on me. I think it's easy to see it in the extreme forms, but the subtle forms, and it is a joy robber. It just takes away our sense of responsibility and that we can go through this. And here's a good example. If we go to Christianity, Christ was not a victim in any way. He was crucified on a cross. But there was not a sense of any victim. He did not act like a victim. He didn't act in any way that looked like a victim of circumstances, because he was submitted to the Father's will, that it was all planned out, and his job was simply to obey. Well, and I simply to obey, I don't want to say anything in error here, but there seemed to be, he was obedient to the Father. He did what his Father wanted. He died on a cross for us, and life was difficult for him, but he had joy, that I can tell. He had love. His suffering meant something. It was not meaningless. Victimization feels like life is meaningless. I go through the same pain and suffering every day. Say, like, I was abused. Well, actually, I was abused as a kid. And that's why I'm pretty bold at, I've been on both sides. I've been in the camp where kind of, woe is me. Why is life happening to me? Why are my parents not the way I wanted them to be? Yeah, the idea of, I was ready to die from my youth. But something snapped in me. Well, and a couple of things snapped in me. Um, yeah, it's a good story to tell by God's grace, if this works out. Is that I became a Christian in 1980. Well, my world changed. I mean, it just changed. I realized there was purpose in life beyond just me. And I then went away to college. I was like what we could call a baby Christian, who, I had all these friends. I was in a Christian singing group. But I will admit that I was immature in relationships. I really didn't know how to not depend on people too much. And at college, as much as I was so thankful to get away from my family, I didn't miss them, but I was out of my element. It was great. It was probably one of the coolest times, but one of the darkest times. I kind of felt suicidal thoughts not all the time, but it got darker, darker, darker. Oh gosh, this is so. It's not embarrassing. I think it's funny because I've told the story many times. So, guess where I was working? I was working at Whitman County Crisis Line, and I was supposed to be helping people with suicide. I decided I didn't necessarily want to be there anymore. I got one of the best trainings you could get anywhere. It was really a good experience. I went to the person, the director, and said, I don't think it's right for me to be doing this right now because I'm going through a lot of emotional learning. And I might have said I felt suicidal, but you didn't jump on me. Let me help you. Yeah. No, because I really didn't want to act out on those feelings. I was just really, really, really depressed. And there was self pity a little bit with this. Yeah, I'll tell on myself. This will be good for me. So I had a friend, his name was Ken, and I was pretty emotionally dependent on him. I never had kind of a best friend. And so I kind of used the phrase, if I'll be here. He challenged me and says, what do you mean by that? And he kind of emotionally knocked me out of this, let's not feel sorry for yourself. And if you're suicidal, don't go there. I'm thankful for that because, it was probably one day of that and I kind of snapped out of it. But I then learned that I was at a cafeteria. It was embedded in the whole tuition and housing at a dorm that I could eat whatever I wanted. It was not like today where you might swipe and I'll take this and this. No, it was just eat whatever you wanted. And so there were jelly donuts. There were like donuts every single day. And somehow at the age of 18, I did the math and I was eating donuts every day. And I thought, I think I'm getting depressed because of all this jelly donuts. And I decided to experiment. I'm not going to have jelly donuts. And I felt myself climb out of this better. Mix that with poor sleep because there was no one there to tell me to go to sleep. And getting away from, and I'll say this, my family was abusive. I mean, just a year earlier, my dad got upset with me on my graduation day and kicked me in the stomach, so that was memorable. So when you leave this chaotic environment and now when you're by yourself, it's similar to when the water is still, you can actually see yourself. And so I could see myself and I didn't necessarily like what I saw. I had self-pity. I was immature. In the midst of all this, there were really good things, but that's where I was at. So I was praying, thankfully, and one day, I won't share probably the most mystical experience, but I'll just say I had a mystical experience where everything felt right, like it's going to be okay. And before that time, I got this thought, and it was a good thought. And this was the thought that if Christ's success was based on how many people who love him, he would be a failure. But his success, if we even want to use that word, is based on how much he loves. And so then the thought says, so why are you expecting people to try to love you? And I was pretty needy, and something snapped into me where it's like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on just loving others. That's where the joy is. Yes, it's nice to have people love me, but I can't depend on that. I can depend that on from God, but not from people. And so I shifted. That paradigm shift just shifted everything. And here I was wanting to be a therapist maybe someday. I was working at the crisis line. I was taking sociology courses, but Yeah. So I shifted out of being a victim. And now that I think about it, I really had some victim things. So when you're living in a household where your parents are unpredictable and you could suffer physical abuse, you learn not to speak up. I would then get picked on at school. And there was a year or two I was bullied like almost every other day. I was the kid where I was so insecure. I only wore this one coat. I was overweight. And I was literally afraid to take this coat off because at least I knew I looked this way. No one teased me about that, but it would be hot in the classroom. Thankfully, when I became a Christian in high school, that snap, the coat came off. It was just a non issue. I also lost weight. Um, I just didn't care as much, which I think helps, not caring what people think. Um, but yeah, no, I was repeated. I won't go into the details, but just repeatedly teased. Um, and the love I experienced in the church was just the exact opposite. That unconditional acceptance was astounding to me. So it's like I went from a desert where there's no water to like an oasis where there's water. Um, so somewhere, let's see, where else could I have been victimized? So I would still have patterns in my life interacting with family members where I would feel victimized. Went to therapy. This is probably the first time I learned to do something different. That to have, how do I put this? And I wish I'd prepared better. I really do. It is what it is. I might go online and look for something while I speak, and then we can go there. I learned something called the Karpman triangle. I think this should work. Just to be this quick, all I need is something that shows the Karpman triangle. It's also called the drama triangle. View file. Okay, there you go. This is great. And I think I'll do a video on this as well. Screen capture. And here we go. So hopefully you are seeing what I am seeing here. So you have a victim. So when I'm talking about victimization, this is a role we play. We play this role of victim. And we don't do it with everybody. In fact, it's really important to realize, and that's why when I make it on the board, I put little quotation marks here, because it's this role we step into and a role we step out of. But in the drama triangle, there's a rescuer. This is someone who rescues the victim. And I'm not sure why the lines go this direction, but basically, this person is rescuing the victim. A classic example of this would be a woman who's suffering some abuse from a boyfriend or a spouse. She's out to lunch with her girlfriend, assuming, and the girlfriend hears the story of how this happened over the weekend and all this. The girlfriend says, look, you got to get out of this relationship. This is not healthy for you. I would leave him. So all those statements really cross over boundaries and keep the victim a victim, believe it or not. It still keeps them as a victim because it's saying, I know more than you. It steps over boundaries. And the victim goes, okay, I'll just do whatever you tell me to. just like they do with the persecutor. The persecutor steps over boundaries and tells them, hey, where's my meal? What's wrong with you? Can't you do this right? It's very controlling. Rescuing has that similar quality, like, can't you do this right? Let me do it for you. Um, I'm going to rescue you from the life you've created for yourself. Now, these roles can switch immediately. They can, I'm going to go back to, you can be antagonistic, argumentative, kind of like poking your persecutor with a stick, because that's kind of victim-like. And then the persecutor beats you up, and we'll just assume it could be emotional, spiritual, it could be physical, financial, whatever. The persecutor does that, then they feel bad for having done that. So then they apologize. I'm so sorry. And they may rescue you. The girlfriend having lunch could be so angry, like, why don't you just leave him? What's wrong with you? Are you even smart? Well, little do they realize they've moved from the rescuer to the persecutor, just like that. I see this a lot where people were in an abusive relationship and they leave that relationship for a man or a woman who's going to rescue them, and they go, wow, that bad ex of yours, I will take care of you, I will love you. Little do they realize that that rescuing is very boundary crossing, and you should watch out. Let's look at this from and I'm not trying to scare people with politics, but let's look at it from a political side. And I think this will jump out at you and you'll start to go, whoa, this is so interesting. Need to find, boy, sorry for all that. Let's say that I feel like I've been a victim of my society. That either I live in a racist environment, or I live in an economically unfair environment. Now, I'm not saying, and I have people be really mad at me just by suggesting that this doesn't exist. The problem is the very people, the social workers, the politicians that say they're these poor people, that's not fair. Well, little do they realize they're still keeping them in a victim mentality. That's why some therapists can keep people sick, because they rescue. You want to assist and support and encourage, but you can't live their life for them. Like Christ doesn't really rescue us. He does, but he doesn't. We have to say, I want to be rescued. He doesn't usurp our will. And if you look at Christianity as a whole, boy, I'm talking a lot about this, you don't see any of the saints, any of the Christians acting like victims. You just don't. Even though he rescues, he helps the oppressed. And in fact, we are supposed to be there for the widow and the orphan, but we don't encourage them to be, oh, the poor widow and the poor orphan. We raise them up as much as they want help. And the persecutor, there are persecutors out there in racist environments, and the persecutor economically, we know it exists, that they are, and I want to get into it because then I'll become upset, but I do know of companies that prey upon people, that see people as objects, that just want their money. And it's in many different industries. And if I started to talk about it, people go, really? They do that? It's like, yeah, they do that. So, how do I, and so here, this would be a good example. If I start getting mad, maybe we could pick something that's interesting. I think it's good to use this as an example. So let's take the food industry. Um, the food industry wants to make money. How can they make more money? By putting cane sugar in a lot of things, or high fructose corn syrup, because they know that if it's sweeter, it hijacks our brain to want more of it. We see this with ketchup, mustard. Um, they put it in hash browns. Like when I stopped eating cane sugar, it's like it's in everything. It's like it doesn't need to be in everything. Like they use it in hash browns to encourage browning. Okay. Um, if I buy the hash browns, which are hard to find, but if the hash browns don't have sugar, guess what? The ones that's a little bit sweeter will be I'll be manipulated to buy those. So if I just try to stay logical, kind of non-emotional, non-victim, and we'll talk about how not to be a victim. That's kind of what this is going to be about. I would just be seeing, wow, this is unfortunate, but I would be accepting that this is how some companies want to deal. And I don't need to be a victim of their ploy, and I'll just buy things that don't involve sugar, or I understand that greed exists. If I become a victim, I could be really, 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 really mad at them. I could go the direction of weighing way too much, but I'm a victim of circumstances. I can't help it that they manipulate all food. And I'll be dramatic here. They've turned all food into not being even food. It's sugar. And it's all a bunch of drugs. In the drugs, you say, oh, yeah, drugs. Like whether it's chocolate or whether it's oatmeal has to be so sweet. Um, Salad dressing has to be so sweet. And yeah, they're all a bunch of bad people. Well, see, I'm acting like a victim there. If I get rescuing with this, I'm going to pull away cookies from people's mouths, and I'm going to be really angry. Any opportunity I can, I'll be enlightening the world with how did you know, like, did you know that they do this and they do that and they do this? So I tried to stay away from something political, but if you take this template and see what's going on, you'll start to go, whoa, this is incredible. Like we are the victims of the coronavirus. The government is the rescuer. And who's the persecutor? Well, we can go back and forth between is the government the persecutor or are they the rescuer? Well, they say they're rescuing us from ourselves, as if they can't even let us make our own decisions. They have a plan for our lives. So how do I not be a victim in that and be mad as a hornet or very passive? By stepping out of the triangle. Step out of the triangle. Well, first of all, and I'm so sorry, I should have prepared better, but step one, notice that you're even in the triangle. Notice that you're in a mode of rescuing, a mode of being a victim, or the mode of being a persecutor. And we all struggle. We all can be blind to one of these things. I can tell you this, you won't have peace in any one of those corners. I've never experienced that. You might have temporary satisfaction being mad and angry or rescuing people, but long term it doesn't work. Two, you want to be able to step out of the role and think about the opposite. So, what is the opposite of a victim? A place of power, like personal power, not I'm powerful, but I have choice. I can adapt. I can be resilient. There are people who lost their legs and they're resilient. The human spirit is amazing. God has so designed us with this ability to rise to the occasion after some really difficult circumstances. In fact, we're very inspired by this. There are no, this is funny, goes without saying, there are no inspirational movies about a victim and how badly they were victimized. No. We tend to find some inspirational movies involving rescuing. We do tolerate that a little bit, but the reality is usually the rescuer is so humble and the people they rescue don't act like a bunch of victims. Um, they quickly grow and expand. I saw a movie which I can't even remember. It was something like What Love Looks Like, but it was about a journalist who from America went to another country in Asia and decided to live among the children who were orphans and how they survived. All these people didn't look like actors. It was wild. It was a very well done movie. And I think it was What Love Looks Like. And well, I don't want to do a spoiler, but I'll just say there's scenes where people who were in trafficking and held in containers started coming out. And it was done by a young girl who was just opening a door. And it was a pretty powerful scene to see freedom. See, freedom is the opposite of these corners. Freedom from being a victim, freedom from being an abuser, freedom from being a rescuer. Let's look at if we have any questions tonight. So other steps out is to talk with healthy people who pull us out of ourselves, help us not get into that state, being in that mode. I would also recommend reading. We do often find that if I read people who are more in a difficult state than where I'm at, and they've succeeded, we go, whoa, that's inspiring. And then we unconsciously say, what excuse do I have? And, what excuse do I have? This person had experienced this. Yeah, I guess I'll share another story, and it's an interesting story. This one client I was working with had experienced a repeated abuse situation. I want to kind of keep it vague, but I'll say that it resulted in what she thought might be a pregnancy, which then led to a miscarriage. She was horrified. I didn't get to work with her often. Very short, like one session and goodbye, and then another session later. Well, she came back and a similar thing happened, and I said, I really think that you might reach out to parents and to get more support. She didn't necessarily want to do that, and she was of age where she didn't need to do that. It was that in between being an adult, and I wanted to honor her sense of choice. But she had dressed in a way, and I'm not even saying provocative, but a way that would make her stand out. In the question, I was talking with a CPS worker, because I did talk with a CPS worker in a way. And she says, well, you don't want to victim blame. And this worker was nice, but she says, you don't want to victim blame. And it made me think, what is victim blaming? Well, I think it's a legitimate phrase. It is a thing. And I run into it with domestic violence, that the perpetrator role makes it seem like they wouldn't have to do what they had to do had the victim not did what they did, and it's blaming the victim. But I also believe that always thinking that the victim has no part in it of their own is a problem, because it keeps them a victim. And this girl could continue to have problems if she continues to do the same thing. And so the problem, and I guess CPS could come after me with this, but if CPS, not everybody at CPS probably thinks this way, but if CPS comes as rescuers of children, which seems appropriate, but the problem with rescuing is that it's making it seem like the victims have no choice of their own. And so that's just not the best template. I think it's better to be able to say that this girl has choices. If she doesn't want to experience the same kind of thing over and over, she has to look at, what part do I have in this? That's what I'm saying. Is it gets us out of victim mode when I ask myself, what part do I have in this? It's as simple as that. So, and yeah, I think this would be challenging. If the governors are seeing problems in their states, and we'll say the problem is rioting, people throwing rocks and killing people, if the governor sees this through the lens of a rescuer, they may go and see that either these people have a right to protest, if you want to call it that, and how dare you stop them from protesting, but they're killing people and they're doing bad stuff. Or they come in with tanks and going to make them stop. Well, that's kind of usurping some right for protesting, but both ways are inappropriate. If the governors could say, what part do I have in this? What have I done that could have contributed to this mess? Boy, humility would attract the grace of God and things would be better. But that's not necessarily how leaders with power act. If we, the people, watch YouTube and point the finger at, well, that governor or that government or those rioters, they're just bad people. Well, the problem there is it makes it feel like I'm the good one and they're all the bad one. And that's kind of a subtle form of victim mentality. If I say, well, what part do I have in this? Have I been, promoting racism without knowing it? Did I ignore their pleas for many years about the injustice with, Black Americans being killed by white police officers? But I also think that while that exists, I also think if you look at the stats, it's the media is playing us, and we can be victims of how they're playing us. So, for instance, to get out of victim mentality, we say, well, what part do I have in this? Well, if I watch that media outsource, I'm just promoting more viewership. Or if I purchase that product, but I'm so mad that that company does it, well, don't purchase the product. You have choices. Well, say like, a person can protest as a victim, if this is the, oh, I'm so, woe is me, you're so bad. That's different than maybe trying to promote a good message of how to heal America. Um, if I go in and protest and say that blankety blank person is such an evil blank blank, well, that could be abusive. Um, and the message is not going to be heard so well. Again, um, any time we're in those triangles, it's not a good thing. Parents might take turns being the rescuer from the abusive father. Oh, there, honey, here's a cookie. Your dad, he's so mean. Okay. Or the kid is unruly, the parents are scared to death, and they don't know how to put their foot down with him without either being abusive on one hand, or they feel victimized by their own kids. And so they come to therapists, they want the therapist to fix this. And if we ask the question, well, what part do I have in this? What can we change there? When you start to change and grow, all of a sudden you don't feel like a victim anymore. Yeah, I'm like, I shared those stories with my parents. I don't feel like a victim of circumstance. Um, yeah, I have choices. And I would actually say those things I'm thankful for because I'm not sure I would have found God in the process. So, in light of that, I want to share some of the spiritual reading. It's from a book with Pain and Love for Contemporary Man by um, by someone else, but it's this spiritual holy man in Mount Athos. He's passed away to the other side, but St. Paisios. And this is what it says. Good thoughts are an antidote to noise pollution. Um, Noisy devices are used today even for small things. It is therefore important, if we ever find ourselves in a noisy place, to find noise with good thought, to fight noise with good thoughts. Rather than say, do not use this or do not use that because it makes noise, we should start thinking good thoughts. So, for example, when you hear a spraying machine, you could try to imagine that it's coming from a helicopter and think something like, what if one of the sisters, he's referring to nuns here, had become gravely ill and the helicopter was coming to take her to the hospital? Wouldn't I be upset then? Thank God we are all well. So it says this is the kind of situation that needs cleverness, to practice the art of creating good thoughts. So I just love this piece. See the cleverness, the art of creating good thoughts. And I tried to just do this. I mean, my problem is I don't always ask God for the strength I need to do something. I just try doing it. But I said, God, help me to see good thoughts in everything. What a clever prayer. I never thought to pray that. It's there. It's right there in the Bible. Just never thought to do that. And I've tried to, but it lasts 10 minutes and then it goes funny. But any time you do it, it's a step in the right direction. So, for example, when you hear the noise of a cement mixer and the pump pushing the cement, you could be thinking, thank God we are not being bombed and houses are not being blown to pieces. We have peace and people are building new homes. So it sounds clever and it sounds funny. But my great grandmother was like that. She saw positive in things. I would be more negative. She'd turn it into a positive. So I could hear, and he's talking about how noisy the world is. He embraces the noise. Like he later talks about, what he said there is that I could be annoyed by a noisy cement mixer, but I could think the same. And notice that's a victim. Like, oh my gosh, it's so noisy. This would be a good example. Like, there was probably some construction outside my office. Oh, and traffic. Lots of traffic now because of the coronavirus has kind of died down. And I said this the other day. It's like, well, good. This means that we're getting back to normal. Good. It means there's construction. This is good. So to see the good in things. And before all this, I was probably complaining, wow, there's just too many people here. That's being a victim. Um, so they say, what happens when one's nerves cannot take it anymore? Shattered nerves, what does that mean? Could it be that it's your thoughts that are shattered? Where is your creativity? Nothing, there is nothing better than a good thought. Someone had built a house at a very quiet place. Eventually, a gas station was built on one side of him and a new road was opened on the other. Then a nightclub was built that played loud music until midnight. The poor man could not sleep. He began using earplugs and started taking sleeping pills. He was going mad. He came to see me, Rhonda, and that's a term of endearment for like a spiritual father. Such and such is going on. I cannot find peace. What must I do? I am thinking of building another house elsewhere. You should think good thoughts, I replied. Think what would happen if a war were going on, tanks were being built in the gas station, and there is a hospital nearby that is full of injured people. Then they tell you, stay here, we will guarantee your safety. You can go out of your house freely, but only up to a certain point because you may come near under fire. Or you may stay inside and no one will bother you. Wouldn't you then consider your house a blessing? This is why you should be saying to yourself, thank God there is no war and people are well, going about their business. Next door, they are repairing cars instead of building tanks. There is really no hospital nearby and no war casualties. It is not tanks that are passing by, but cars that are taking people to work. Bring good thoughts to mind, and your heart will be filled with the doxology to God. So, doxology means praise and thankfulness. Now, when I read this, and I read this more recently, but I realized I was plagued with some negative thinking about the coronavirus, that I had watched the media, and the media would be just negative. But he's just making up stuff out of anything. Like, I'm thankful that I can walk today. I'm thankful that the coronavirus, in theory, hasn't taken more people. I could see people that would kind of creep me out just the way I am. And here I work with people, but if there's a bunch of them and they're younger and you can tell they've been drinking and into mischief, let's say, I could walk out of the building, and I guess I can say that there is a marijuana shop, one of the largest, right next door. And people often do drug trades right outside the parking lot. It's like, that's negative and it makes me upset. If I walked out and tried to think as positive as possible, to saying, it's good to see people enjoy themselves. Now, people go, are you okaying marijuana use and rough housing? It's like, no. But I'm trying to think positive. I'm trying to see a positive spin. Which is going to serve me the best? Which thinking is going to serve me the best? The negative fault finding with the world, or a more positive disposition to see the good in things? And my great grandmother would have seen the good in things. See, when I was thinking of myself in college and how I felt so lonely and didn't have many friends, and I mean, I would go want to play racquetball with someone and they go, oh no, I'm busy, but then 10 minutes later they asked me to borrow my racquetball racket so that they could go play with someone else. I kind of felt sad. I did what I felt was the Christian thing, was sure, here, that's okay. And I felt sad, like, I'm really not that good of a player. That would be self-pity. That would be self-oriented. But if And it was focused on trying to get love. It's kind of like if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. If you lose your life for Christ's sake, you'll gain it. And if the better way to think is how much I love people, then I would see it as a compliment that my friends could feel comfortable to say, hey, I don't really want to play now, but 10 minutes later could come over and borrow my racket. Good, I'm glad that I can be of service. And I probably did that and inwardly felt kind of bad, but it's all about how you think about these things. Yeah, it's really about how you think about things. If you have a pastor or a church leader, a priest, and you start to think negative thoughts about them, I would just avoid that, because it would be an enemy's tool to try to divide you from someone who cares about you. Even if they're really a bad leader, there's some value to try to see the positive in them and not say anything negative, and to try to believe it in one's heart, because it would be the same kind of love Christ has for us, that while we were yet sinners, he died for us. He didn't wait till we were perfect. A lot of the difficult situations in, say, like the New Testament or even parts of the Old Testament look so bad, not good, was the very time when God would act. And we are so used to these stories that we just see the positive, but the reality is, like, they are scared for their lives on a boat being tossed around, and they say, help, help. And Christ wakes up and says, why have you little faith? What was so scary turned into a positive. If their friend Lazarus had passed away, that dark moment was turned to joy. You have Egypt, which is a different story. I mean, 400 years of praying, help, help, and God then sends a deliverer, Moses, to help them out. They get out after all these plagues, and I wonder what it'd be like to be in the midst of those plagues going, this doesn't look good. I mean, this is really the right way. And they did know that this might be the wrath of God, I believe. But to go through it. And we have to see it that way if we want to have joy. And then they get out, and then they're in the middle of the desert, and it's like, you just brought us out here to die. And again, see, we saw what happened to the people that thought negatively. And often as Christians, we're so focused on, if I do the right things, God's happy with me. And if I don't do bad things, then God's happy with me. But I think it goes deeper than that, that God wants us to be blessing him with our thoughts. To just go through the day trying to think the positive of what's going on. And I know some out there are feeling like, could this be the end of times? And could there be persecution for Christians? How would we survive, persecution? Christ shares this in the gospel, and he says, when these things happen, look up and rejoice, for redemption draweth nigh. It's like, well, that's the opposite of what you would think. Even after there's verses about some of the elect may actually be led astray, and men might be fainting with fear because of the anxiety. People flee to the hills, like, that's a positive thought. But yeah, no, that it's a to-do thing. It's not, say, wait till you feel like in the good mood to look up and say your redemption draweth nigh. No, I think that's what we could do as a way to not be a victim, is to say, you know what, praise be to God. I don't feel necessarily that happy feelings, but I'm told to rejoice in this, in these trials. And I'm just going to aim myself that direction. I do think that God's grace begins to come to us in a better way. I've I heard from a holy person who said that don't give up when things are so difficult, because that's actually when something really good happens. And they suggested that the warfare gets worse before the good thing happens. And if we can stay connected to God and positive thinking, good things happen. It says, I just want to read some more here. So what happened to this poor man? The poor man understood what that what matters most is to confront problems with the right frame of mind, and he left in peace. So again, I just love this. This is so bizarre. Confront what matters most. No, so the poor man understood that what matters most is to confront the problems with the right frame of mind. That could be a wonderful prescription for many of us. And I needed to hear that today. I need to confront what matters most, Erik, is to confront my problems with the right frame of mind. That's it. So whatever's going to happen in the future, when I have a right frame of mind, I do okay. If I don't have the right frame of mind, I don't do okay. And that's why reach out if you need help. So the guy threw away the pills. Little by little, he managed to deal with the situation with good thoughts. Eventually, he threw away his pills and had no problem sleeping at night. Do you see how a good thought can help us deal with troubles? And again, the beginning of the story is that there was loud everything around him. Once I was on a bus and the driver turned the music on really loud. A group of pious young men, pious means holy and devout Christian, reminded him that there was a monk on the bus. St. Paisius was a monk, making signs to help to him to turn it off, the music, but without success. In fact, he turned the music even louder. Let him be, I told him. It doesn't matter. The music is holding the ison to my chanting. So ison is a musical term used in Byzantine Orthodox music to keep the notes steady. And it's like when I'd vacuum, I'd hum. It's a tune. It's very soothing. St. Paisius learned how to take what was going on. And it says, God forbid, I thought, if there had been an accident nearby and they had to put the injured in our bus, how would I hear to see people with broken legs? Or how would I bear to see people with broken legs and heads? Thank God that people are not only well, but are actually singing. This way, I ended up having a great trip and spent my time singing. So he visualized, I don't know if he visualizes, but he thinks, well, gee, there could be people on the bus that are moaning and groaning from an accident. Again, I think it's very interesting to really look at it. I wouldn't call it extreme, but it's just a different approach. And you make yourself happy this way. Like if the TV set is working, you think, I'm happy that I have a TV set. If the food was terrible, you go, no, at least there's food. I was eating at a restaurant. I will confess that I can be a little bit picky when it comes to not food in terms I want it to taste good, but like price and service. And if it's not up to par, and I mean, to me, they just seem like huge mistakes, like huge, huge mistakes. Like, I went into a restaurant, I'll tell on myself here, it was New Year's Eve, that should tell you something. I was with my in-laws who were in their 80s, and I won't mention the place, but we waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. And it was like, it shouldn't be that long. I decided to go walking through the restaurant, and I see like literally half the tables are empty. And I thought, there's a whole crowd of people all standing and sitting, like, what's going on? Couldn't believe this. Again, oh, this ties in. I was asking like a rescuer, like, I can't believe this. I asked the gal, hey, can we be seated? And I forget some of the story, so I won't embellish, but whatever she did was not to my satisfaction. So then I took pictures. I walked down the aisle taking pictures. And so this drew attention, not with the people, but the management. I said, can I talk to the manager? And then, what are you taking pictures for? And I said, there is a crowd of people here. Like, there had to have been 20 to 30 people. And all these empty tables. Like, what's going on? And I don't want to mix stories, but I've had stories where the manager refused to come out and even talk to us, like give us a reason. So this made it unpleasant. Then they sat us in like the worst section that could be. Oh, you know what? I think this turns out a little bit more positive. The manager did come out and was extremely good at calming us down. She apologized. She took responsibility. I'm so sorry. And do you want us to move you to a different table? I said, no, that's fine. I just need to, and this sounds so codependent, I just need to know that you get the point. So this is where I get on a high horse. I'm there to save the world from poor restaurant management. And it makes this worse is we had been to this restaurant, other locations, like 3 times, and it's the same thing. And they're all over the place. There's like only maybe 4 restaurants I've ever seen with this name. And they're probably a chain. And they're like, maybe 2 hours drives every which way. They're far away. And it's just poorly run. And one time I'm not trying to get free food, but we got free food and reduction here. Yeah, no. So you would ask, why would I go back? Well, it seemed to be a good place to go. But here's the thing. I could have been thankful that we're all together, that my in-laws had no heart attacks. See, this is how St. Paisius would handle this. We're all breathing. The food wasn't that terrible. We're all together on New Year's, and we're not being bombed. Now that seems funny, but we aren't being bombed. So therefore, we could be happy. He would use, I think I felt bad. Now I'm trying to debate. I'm trying to think, did I... I might have apologized to her or not. When I get upset, I try to apologize. And I think, boy, my memories, I know I probably took this to confession, but I think that the girl was so upset she might have been in tears. And all I did was challenge her. And so the manager came out and handled it from there. So, but all I was doing is just pointing out that there's all these empty tables here, and someone just needs to clean them and work a little bit harder. And anyway, but I don't know her story. Maybe she's recovering from cancer. Maybe she had parents that didn't teach her how to work, and maybe she has self-doubt. See, that's what I'm getting at, is this whole thing has to do with, how do I not be a victim? And really, the deeper thing is, how do I change my mindset? Yeah, I'll have to pray and look at that. And my family could testify that I expect more out of customer service situations. It's just, and do I have a lot of funny things that happen? I do. The poor people that get me as a customer, it's like, um, yeah, it just goes from bad to worse. And how do I think positive? Like, I took my car in for oil and the dipstick broke. So they said, well, we can't pull your dipstick out. We need to get a new one. We'll get that ordered. Okay. It was fine then. But there were a number of mishaps. I won't get into all that. Like the workers weren't working as hard as they could have been on this. They didn't order it. Days go by, and then I said, well, is it ordered now? Well, they said it'd be in Monday. Well, no, it's not in Monday. So mishaps. So then I made it more and more of a bigger thing because it just went bad to worse. I called the manager of the place. So they're working, the manager, the regional manager, trying to say, this is my experience. So they're working on it. I think probably, to be honest, on the positive side, maybe it might have been 2 or 3 weeks until we got that fixed. Um, how could I have turned that into a positive? By looking at the hundreds of times we probably have used the service and it didn't go bad, to see that it wasn't that old of a car, so it broke. Um, did the people, oh, the positive is this guy was, once the fire was lit, it went to such another positive direction that this guy really took it upon himself to apologize, to call me, to let me know. And I can be that way too. When I find a good manager, it's like, this is like, I just love you. And I talk how positive it is. Like today, I called a credit card processing person, and I could tell the person was so good at fixing things. He did my scan compliance test when I was talking to him. He gave me options about a card reader thing. I mean, it just, no, I said, you're incredible. You do the good customer service that I always expect. I said, what? He says, is there anything else? Well, I need to know your name because you're really just, and I guess I could say this, his name's Jason De Silva with Merchant One. And he says, yeah, we're here to serve you. So here's the thing. I could make someone's day so much more positive by just thanking them and being thankful. Or I can make their life pretty difficult. And I did. I will say in the last 10 days, I made someone's life difficult, but what they had done was so over the top in regards to healthcare with my mother. I felt that they needed to be held responsible. So I don't know. Um, Let me give you another example. Um, um, I think this is good to read. Let me give you another example to show you how a good thought can help us deal with all kinds of situations. So he's literally telling us, use a good thought to help us with all kinds of situations. I was in Jerusalem once with an acquaintance of mine, and there was some sort of festivity. You know what? I'm just going to do myself a favor and grab some drink here. In fact, I'll do you a favor so that you don't have to hear that crazy voice. Um, I was in Jerusalem once with an acquaintance of mine, and there was some sort of festivity. They were celebrating some feast and were constantly crying out, Allah! It was a madhouse. Sing to him with loud shouts, praise him with loud clashing cymbals. You could not understand what they were saying. It went on all night long. My acquaintance got up and spent the night sitting by the window. He did not sleep a wink. but I slept like a baby by just bringing to mind only good thoughts. I thought to my mind the scene of the Hebrews' exodus from Egypt when they sang unto the Lord after crossing the Red Sea, and I was deeply moved. This is how you too should confront a difficult situation. Think, think good thoughts. Let's say, for example, the door slam. You must say, if God forbid something has happened to a sister, meaning a nun, if she has fallen down and broken her leg, would I be sleeping now? Now it is only a door that slammed. She must have to do something for the monastery. But if you start criticizing or thinking, here she goes again slamming the door, such a careless person, you will not find peace. The moment you start having such thoughts, the devil will come and upset you. At night, you may hear an alarm go off. You hear it once, and after a few minutes, you hear it again. If you start thinking good thoughts, this soul must have been very tired. She is probably having a hard time getting up. It is good that she slept another half an hour and then got up to do her spiritual duties. Then you will not be annoyed or upset when someone woke you up. But if all you can think of is yourself and how the alarm clock woke you up, then you will be saying, what is going on is in this place? Can't anyone get some rest? Thinking good thoughts is the best form of ascesis, meaning a process by which we die to ourselves to make us acquire more of the grace of God. It says, thinking good thoughts is the best form of ascesis. There is no greater help than good thoughts. Yeah, we talked about this before with the thieves on the cross, and I realize some of us may not have a religious persuasion or Christianity, but I think the principles are good. We are at the mercy of our thoughts. And sometimes we are afflicted with such devilish thoughts that are just so horrible. What we could do there is say, you know what? By God's grace, God has so allowed me to deal with this. This must be good for me somehow. If I can't take it anymore and I need to reach out to others, then I guess I'll reach out to others. And maybe it's this temptation or trial that helps humble me to reach out for help. And I'm much better off being this weak, needing to reach out to people for love and support, than if I had all my act together and I would then just be I would just be self-contained. I would have everything I need. Yeah. Yep, acquiring God's power through, well, everything the church has to offer. But I think that there's something good about good thoughts, that they attract God's grace. And I think negative thoughts repel it. Yeah, so I hope that this is helpful. Try to notice when is there anything more I should say about the triangle? I guess I should say this, is that, let's go there a little bit. Triangle. So, what are the antidotes? Well, good thoughts help us not get so angry and I deserve better, what's wrong with you? The rescuer thoughts, that may be the more tempting to think that this is more holy or more healthy, but the reality is it's like, I can pray in secret for this person. No one will know. And unless God says, Erik, go do something to help this person or call this person, and then still do it in the mode of asking, would you like help? That is so different than me not even asking God what he thinks, not asking for his power, just running off and compulsively rescuing. The victim, which I was kind of focusing on a little bit more, how to not be a victim. Well, just thinking positively, taking anything that happens to you And I've had some challenging things in the last week and the last month. And thankfully, I didn't get stuck on them as much as I could. But to see this is all good. And I like this phrase, it's all good. It's all good. Um, yeah, yeah, it's all good. Even if the person doesn't really have a religious persuasion. For Christians, we have a verse that says, all things work together for the glory of God for those who love Christ and are called according to his purpose, I think it is. So we really deep in our hearts believe that there is good. And so, anyway, I want to say goodbye here. You take care. I wish you well. Um, Next week, I'll be meeting on Tuesday. I will be flying down to, this sounds so funny, I've been saying this, rescue my in-laws from the coronavirus down in Arizona. That shouldn't interfere our stream. But I did ask them, would you like to be rescued? And they said yes. In fact, they wanted to kind of delay this rescue mission, and I kind of set a limit and said, no, I consider this kind of a quick thing. Let's get you out of there. And so I said 2 weeks. So said I wouldn't be feeling like a victim of circumstance and all that. So anyway, you might not have needed to hear that, but you take care, and I wish you well.